Well, he hadn't let anything go. He's aware of everything, but ultimately the whole thing comes to a cataclysmic end in the very end. Every dispensation, every time frame, everything that man is involved in always ends in man's failure, and the Lord has to reach in and then pull you back up. But there's some hope, and I'm just going to give you a couple of illustrations tonight about it. But there's some hope for people that are Christians. If you're a Christian, if you're saved, then you realize that your final destination is fixed. You don't ever have to worry about your salvation. David said when he had some problems there with Bathsheba and those things and got into the mess that he got into, he said, Lord, restore unto me the joy of thy salvation. Yeah. You don't have to worry about losing it in this age. It's not yours to lose. There are verses in the Bible that show things. I'm sure your pastor's taught you about that, but it doesn't have anything to do with you. But you sure can lose your joy. Yeah. I mean, you sure can have fear in your heart. You sure can have trepidation in your heart. You sure can have uncertainty in your heart. You can sure watch the gasoline prices go up, the food prices go up, and the clothing prices go up, and then all of a sudden the banking account's going down, and the cost of living's going up, and you're getting wondering about what's going to happen tomorrow, and this and that and the other, and uncertainty can strike you, even though you're a saved individual. You say, well, preacher, what do I do when those kind of things happen? I can't promise you that you'll always have everything, but I can promise you you'll have enough. Amen. You say, well, what happens if I wind up starving to death? Well, the Lord will come along and take care of you. He always has a way of providing for you. Never seen the righteous forsaken, nor seed begging bread. I'm not a prophet. I'm not here to try to tell you what's going to happen in the future. But the way it looks like it's going, it looks like you might want to stand by for heavy rolls. It looks like you might want to stand by for life as you know it might change. Yeah. And if it changed, the issue becomes, what's a Christian going to do? How are you going to live? Sometimes we lose faith and confidence in the Lord. We wonder whether or not the Lord knows that we're in the lion's den. I'd like to have the faith of Daniel. I don't know if you would or not. Maybe it wouldn't be any big deal to you at all to stand up there and to go ahead and pray like he'd been praying all that time. He gets down there to pray, and they get to snapping the pictures, and they take the stuff. They run up to the king. They say, hey, Daniel's praying. You said no praying. Can't be praying. Can't be worshiping another god. And the king said, well, I guess you're right about that. And brings Daniel in. Daniel, you praying? Yes, sir. Well, I was praying. You know you got to go to the lion's den. Yes, sir. I understand that. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around a lion before, but I've been down there in South Africa, and they showed us one down there. Some of you hunted down that way, but they got us between double fences over there in that national park, and we're over there, and I'm watching these big lions up there. They got them claws, and they're over there grabbing the tops of those things like a cat grabs one of them scratching things, and they're running them claws. Them claws are as long as my fingers, man, and they're peeling that bark off that tree. And unbeknownst to me, one of them had slipped up through the brush over there. I never even saw him coming, and he got right over there by that fence and he roared.
Oh, my.
And I sat back on my hind end and screamed like a little girl, man. I mean, I thought, you said, but there was a fence there. Yeah, but I didn't think that lion paid any attention to that fence at all.
Yeah.
That was right after the guy that was there told us the story. He said, what we do is we take a horse and we cut him in quarters, and we put a hind quarter on the back end of the pickup truck, and we drive through the gates and close the gate, and then we stay inside there, and we pull into the area there, the place where they keep him, the pen, and he said the lion comes down there out of the fields and stuff, out of the jungle there, and he'll grab that horse and pull that horse off the back end of that truck. And then he'll lick the hide off of that horse before he tears into it, because his tongue's like sandpaper and all that. Well, he just told me the story, and I'm watching a lion in front of me, and then one roars. You might not have screamed, but I thought, okay, I've seen enough of the lion.
Yeah.
Sometimes that fear gets a hold of you, doesn't it? Sometimes it makes you a little bit afraid. The Bible says the devil's a roaring lion, walking about doing what? Seeking whom he may devour. Wants to tear you from limb to limb. He likes it when you're afraid. But it's not unnatural to be afraid. Sometimes it's good to be afraid. I don't know how Daniel kept from that. I guess Daniel, when he went down the lion's den, I guess he thought to himself, well, this will be it. The lions are down there roaring and they're running around. They probably starved him to death. And he can probably see down the bottom of that pit the bones of people who have been thrown down there before. And he thinks, well, this is it, man. I don't know if I was faced with that, I'd be bold enough to do it. To be torn apart by it, I'd be thinking, well, man, I hope one doesn't get one leg and one doesn't get another one, and one gets this and makes a wishbone out of me. I hope one of them grabs me and, gets me down real quick and gets rid of. I think I'd be just shaking like a dog trying to get rid of a peach seed, man. I think I'd be scared.
Yeah.
But Daniel goes down the lion's den. They throw that stone over the hole of that lion's den there, and about that time the Lord comes in and turns on the light down there and says, hey, Daniel, how you doing? Hey, Lord, how you doing? Fancy seeing you here. Where else did you expect to see me? You saw what I did with the 3 Hebrew children, your buddies, didn't you? They threw them in the fire, and you know where I was? I walked around with them. They were about to freeze to death down there, man. If they didn't have a coat on, they wouldn't be able to stand it. It was so cold down there. If I took care of them, you don't think I'd take care of you? And Daniel said, well, I don't know. I figured my time was up. Maybe I'd messed up. Maybe I'd failed. Maybe I'd have done something wrong. He said, no, I appreciate you praying. A good testimony. I appreciate you doing it, like I appreciate them not bowing the knee over there when the psaltery and the sack button, all them cranked up and they bow down to the image. He said, I appreciate that. And he said to him, he said, now, you look a little tired. Paint this way of a story in my mind. He said, what do you mean you look a little tired? He said, well, you look like you could take the load off your feet. He calls one of them lions over there, and he makes him a little footrest out of the lion there. Live lion there laying down. He lays down like a little kitten, puts another one behind his back there and gives him one on either armrest so he can kind of scratch their heads, and brings him a glass of iced tea, sweet iced tea. Brings it up there for him to have. And Daniel's sitting there, and the Lord sits down there across from him, and he sits there in the chair there. I'll come to my text chair in just a minute, and he's sitting there across there from Daniel in the darkest hour. Excuse me, and Daniel says, Lord, I think this has been a pretty good thing for me. He said, well, what do you mean it's been a good thing? He said, well, I thought I was going to die. I thought this was going to be the end of my life. And the time that I thought things were going to be the worst is the time that you showed up. He said, I've heard you talk to me. I've heard you speak to me. I've heard you spend time with me, but I've never seen you in person. And Daniel sits down there in that thing and has a time with the Lord and has fellowship with the Lord. And that morning comes, and that king comes out at the crack of dawn, man, and he goes to roll that stone out of the way. And if I could paint, I'd have claw marks on that rock up there. And it'd be Daniel's. And Daniel would say, leave me down here a little longer. Leave me down here a little longer. You say, why? Because in my darkest hour, the Lord showed up. There's things you learn about the Lord in the midst of a storm you don't learn otherwise. There's things you learn about the Lord at the hospital, or when you've lost a loved one, when the baby died, when the loved one died, when the husband or the wife or the daughter or the kids went prodigal, or somebody's in a jail cell. There's things you know about God other people don't know. I wonder sometimes whether or not God can trust the modern Christian with trouble. Can God trust you and say to you, hey, listen, I'll minister to you. I'll take care of you. You know what he says in Philippians 4? He said, my God shall supply all your needs through his riches and glory. All my needs, what do? I'll take care of you when you get into some trouble. You're in a passage there in the book of Zephaniah. Look, if you will, please. That's not COVID. You got something in my throat here. I'm just making sure you know that. Y'all all put on a mask if you want to. I'm not going to. I have to wear one all day tomorrow.